Coming up next, the Coral Castle on Beyond.
The subject of this episode of Beyond is considered by many to be the eighth wonder of the world. It also happens to be arguably the greatest unsolved mystery in North America. As if that were not enough, it is a story of romance, which rates up there with the Taj Mahal. This remarkable monument can be seen today in the town of Homestead, southern Florida. The Coral Castle is 1,100 tons of carved coral, built single-handedly by a man who stood 5 foot tall and weighed barely 100 pounds. A man who possessed no modern tools, not even a crane with which to erect the huge edifices he had carved. As if that wasn't enough, he single-handedly moved the whole castle when he decided he wanted a change of neighborhood. How did he achieve this miracle? Well, whenever locals asked him how he managed it, he would say that he knew the secrets of the builders of the pyramids. Tonight, we will delve into this amazing mystery of a man who seemed to have skills and knowledge that could only have come from beyond. Coral Castle in Homestead, Florida, is one of the most amazing structures ever built. In terms of accomplishment, it's been compared to Stonehenge, ancient Greek temples, and even the Great Pyramids of Egypt. It is amazing, some even say miraculous, because it was quarried, fashioned, transported, and constructed by one man, Edward Leedskalnin, a 5-foot-tall, 100-pound Latvian immigrant. Many men have single-handedly built their own homes, but Leedskalnin's choice of building materials is what makes his undertaking so incredible. He used huge blocks of coral rock, some weighing as much as 30 tons, and somehow was able to move them and set them in place and have them work as standing structures, without assistance or the use of modern machinery. His tools were handmade saws, chisels, chains, hoists, and hammers of the most primitive kind. And therein lies the mystery. How did he do it?
Your average run of countertop, we're looking at, probably an hour and a half, 2 hours to do the run. There's a lot of preparation. Stone on stone and diamond. Most of it's diamond. For the most part, all our bits and our pads all have a diamond infusion into them, that little bits of diamond dust. And that's why it's so expensive. Before they got into the power tools, they were doing it by hand, and it's a ton of work. As far as breaking it, there are stone chisels and stuff that you can do, but you have to be very good at what you're doing, and to make anything look right, you definitely have to have a talent to do that. They're 18 pounds a square foot, roughly, and that's 1-inch material. It doesn't matter, 30 tons is 30 tons.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't matter the material.
I know when, on some jobs that we go to, if we take if it's a full slab island, there's usually 6 of us packing that island, and it's only usually about 800 or 900 pounds because we've got the sink cut out of it, and it's not exactly a full slab, but it's a good length, and there's 6 of us that pack it in the house. So that's an all-day process to do one block, and it can take up to 2 days depending on the stone and how their machine's running. If their machine isn't running up to right, if they have mechanical problems, it can take longer. But I know on a good day, it takes them a full day to cut a a block of granite.
How many people are usually working on that block?
It's a machine.
Oh, it's
so
a machine.
Basically, it's they push the button and the blades just go back and forth all day long.
So a machine takes
A machine
a
does
whole
it.
day.
Yeah, it takes all day to cut it.
In certain ways, the Coral Castle is a greater achievement than the pyramid because the structural nature of the pyramid is much simpler, and the use of thousands of slaves makes it a much easier proposition to build than Ed with his Coral Castle. It's estimated that 1,000 tons of coral rock were used in construction of the walls and towers, and an additional 100 tons of it were carved into furniture and art objects. An obelisk he raised weighs 28 tons. The wall surrounding Coral Castle stands 8 foot tall and consists of large blocks, each weighing several tons. Large stone crescents are perched atop 20-foot-high walls. A 9-ton swinging gate that moves at the touch of a finger guards the eastern wall. The largest rock on the property weighs an estimated 35 tons. Working alone, Leedskalnin labored to build the home he originally called Rock Gate Park in Florida City. The story goes that he fled his homeland of Latvia after being jilted by his fiancée, who changed her mind about marrying him because he was too old and too poor. After wandering around the U.S. and Canada for several years, Leedskalnin settled in Florida City working as a farmhand. The farmer and his wife were so taken by Ed that they gave him some worthless land, which was all rock and untillable. He began building his coral home in 1920. Then in 1936, when a planned new subdivision of homes threatened his privacy, combined with an attack by vandals that saw him hospitalized, Ed decided it was time to move and simply up and moved his entire castle 10 miles to Homestead, where he completed it and where it still stands as a tourist attraction. How Leedskalnin managed this feat of engineering has remained a mystery all these years because, incredibly, no one saw him do it.
Some things that he made, I believe a rocking chair out of coral that is perfectly balanced. How he would have done that, I have no idea. How he would move it, he would have had to have built a system of, say, like scaffolding out of timbers, used a pulley system with ropes to lift it, to get it onto something so that he could move it, whether he had a truck that he could back right underneath it after he lifted it, or if he had to employ a series of rollers to roll it to a spot that he could lift it. I would assume that that's how he would have had to have done it. Of course, unless he could levitate, which I doubt. He would have needed a Class 8 tractor trailer, a semi-trailer, 18 wheels at least. Triaxle set of wheels, 12 wheels under the trailer, 8 under the 8 drive wheels, and 2 steering tires. 2 or 3 tractor trailers, maybe more. 2 or 3 tractor trailers, maybe more. But doing it with 2 or 3 tractor trailers, a 60 or a 75-ton crane to do the lifting.
Would one of these be a 75-ton crane?
No.
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 Is it smaller than these?
Larger.
Oh, larger.
Larger.
Oh.
Larger.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And probably 2 or 3 men to do the hookup of the lifting appliances to the blocks. For loading it, hauling it, and unloading it, probably a couple of days.
2 days, 3 men, some 2 or 3 tractor trailers, and a crane.
Yes. Yes.
If you were allowing one man to do that job, how long would you budget for him to work on it?
A couple of years. But it would take a very long time for one person to do that on his own, a very, very long time.
A secretive man, Leedskalnin often worked at night by lantern light. And so there are no credible witnesses to how the small frame man was able to move the huge blocks of rock. Even when he moved the entire structure to Homestead, neighbors saw the coral blocks being transported on a borrowed truck. But no one seems to know how Leedskalnin got them on and off the vehicle. Lots of weird stories have been told and bizarre theories proposed to explain Coral Castle, and since no witness can dispute any of them, they are all worthy of consideration. One story says that some curious neighbors did see how Leedskalnin moved the stones. They say he placed his hands on the stones to be lifted and sang. Somehow this levitated the great rocks. According to an article in Fate magazine, some teenagers spying on him one evening claimed they saw him float coral rocks through the air like hydrogen balloons. But no one took him seriously. Frank Joseph in the Fate magazine article also writes, alternative science investigators suggest that Leedskalnin somehow learned the secret of the world grid, an invisible pattern of energy lines surrounding the Earth, which concentrates points of telluric power which they intersect. It was here, at one of these intersections of Earth energy, that he was supposedly able to move his prestigious stone blocks using the unseen power of our planet. Yet, that still does not explain how Leedskalnin was able to tap his power and others cannot. In an article called The Coral Castle Mystery in Atlantis Rising, author Christopher Dunn asserts, what if there is no such thing as gravity, and the natural forces we already know about are sufficient to explain the noted phenomena we have labeled as gravity? Perhaps Leedskalnin's means of working with the Earth's gravitational pull was nothing more complicated than devising a means by which the alignment of magnetic elements within his coral blocks was adjusted to face the streams of individual magnets he claims are issuing forth from the Earth with a like-repelling pole. He is quoted as saying, I have discovered the secrets of the pyramids. I have found out how the Egyptians and the ancient builders in Peru, Yucatan, and Asia, with only primitive tools, raised and set in place blocks of stone weighing many tons. According to the enigma of Coral Castle, Ed flatly disagreed with modern science and claimed that the scientists were wrong, that nature is simple. He believed all matter consisted of individual magnets, and it is the movement of these magnets within materials and through space that produce measurable phenomena, magnetism, and electricity. These concepts involve the relationship of the Earth to the celestial alignments. He claimed to see beads of light, which he believed to be the physical presence of nature's magnetism and life force, or what we term today, chi. In 1952, falling ill and on his last legs, Leedskalnin checked himself into the hospital and slipped away from this life, taking his secrets with him, secrets that await to be rediscovered. Some clues do exist, however. In his old workshop, there are bottles, boxes, and objects bound with copper wire. There are photos with grids of copper suspended from his crude pulley systems, and hints in some of his recordings. Not enough to serve the answer on a plate, but certainly enough to point us in a direction.
He said he could see the energy within tiny bubbles in the fluids of his eyes. He looked at the sky in a certain way. He learned a lot about energy by observing those kinds of things. He really observed nature. All of sacred geometry is really an advanced understanding of energy. They realize that. They'll understand the blueprints for energy, and then that should lead, everything should fall into place after that. He's actually got 3 books, but I focus on the magnetic current the most, though. It just started all coming together, and then one night, with one of my physical experiments, is when I noticed a visual pattern, and that is when I had the idea that those 2 curves on his book might be much more than I ever thought. Well, I don't have all his principles accomplished as he did, but I do know that the understanding he had of energy is surpassed by anybody I've seen so far.
Right.
And it matches the ancients. That's what's even more captivating about the whole thing. Realizing that those 2 curves on that booklet represent all of sacred geometry, and what's the title of that booklet? Magnetic current. I mean, that alone is huge. That means that all sacred geometry really is an advanced science of an understanding of energy. I've done a lot of small-scale experiments. I haven't lifted any 20-ton rocks or anything, but on a small scale, I have a lot of success with that. They're homemade rotors that I've designed.
What's powering them?
I create a magnetic field with minimal power. Okay, it doesn't drain. I can keep adding those vortex gears, and it doesn't drain, the bubble that I created, unless I break the equilibrium. They're all riding on an equilibrium between the field. There's 2 forces within the field, and they're riding right on that equilibrium. So unless you pull them either way, they're not going to drain the load.
So those things are moving by magnetic force, right?
Yes, I create a magnetic field by using a small amount of power, but as I add them, they're expanding their own fields and in resonance with each other. So it's an expanding resonant magnetic bubble, you could call it. Yeah, and I've never found a limit to it yet so far. Yeah, that's a homemade viewer I made. I wanted to see what was going on between the gears, and that was the best I could do so far. I mean, you could see the geometries that are involved are right on the money with the curves, what they produce. Straight lines at the 22.5, 45, 90-degree angles.
Right.
Those angles are exactly the angles that were produced on my vortex gears, and that's what made me realize that it could be much more than I thought it was. I don't even think I'll ever understand all the dynamics. They're so complex, but those 2 curves in that straight line, that's all of energy broken down to its finest point. That seems to be how it all communicates with each center. Each system seems to communicate with the other centers. To me, that pattern is the blueprints for wave and particle distribution. Ed said the electron came about by Thomson giving a double dose of negative. What the electron really is in his experiments is tiny, tiny pieces of matter that are coming off the cathode. So really, those tiny pieces of matter have 2 kinds of magnets within them, what's holding them together as matter. But he also explains an experiment to run a stream of electrons, or what's called electrons, and put a hanging magnet over top of it, and you'll see both kinds of magnets swinging their own way. So that proves that there's 2 kinds of magnet in that stream. That's a pretty simple experiment. Magnets are the base. If you break it all the way down, that's the base of everything. That's what I like to focus on, those 3 things.
Yes.
The base of everything that exists, and that's brought me more success in experiments than anything so far. Once you know what it is and how it's laid out, you start seeing it everywhere. I mean, I see it in everything. Every vegetable, every flower, everything. It's all a perpetual transformation of the neutral matter. That's what I believe the Holy Grail is, that formula for creation, the same formula that nature uses for all its creation. And that's based on 3 separate things. North Pole magnets, North Pole individual magnets, South Pole individual magnets, and the neutral particles of matter that orbit as a common core.
In this third season of Beyond, we will examine some of the major mysteries of the paranormal, some of which have woven themselves into the fabric of our culture. Many are interconnected with other subjects in this and other seasons of Beyond. Sometimes research leads to answers. Sometimes answers from science, sometimes from spiritual realms, and sometimes from somewhere in between. Mysteries that inspire the imagination and compel us to seek an answer. Mysteries such as supernatural predators, super psychic children, body memories, sexual demons, pyramids, haunted objects, strange creatures, cattle mutilations, voices channeled from beyond, and even thought itself.
Of all the mysteries investigated in this season of Beyond, this is the only one that we can touch, weigh, and measure. It is impossible to debunk or deny that it exists. The very fact that it exists is in itself the mystery. The fact that it was built by one man without a single power tool is a fact. The fact that after he built it and lived in it, this man dismantled and moved all 1,100 tons on an old flatbed with the aid of a driver and a tractor for a distance of 10 miles, and then reconstructed it single-handed, is an absolute, undeniable fact. The comparable wonder, the Taj Mahal, took about the same time to build, but it was built with 7,000 slaves, not one man of a small stature. The fact that doing all of this now with modern machinery would require some of the largest cranes, power tools, jackhammers, diamond drills, huge moving machines, and it is still impossible for one man to do it. What was it that Ed knew that we don't? Whatever it was, whether it was some knowledge of the star power, magnetic attraction, anti-gravity, some forgotten ancient Egyptian or alien knowledge, it was a knowledge that was not apparent to the world either then or now. But the proof of that knowledge exists in the form of a building protected by the U.S. National Registry. We do not possess that knowledge, but we do know that it exists, and probably for the time being, just out of reach and beyond.